Christ is risen.
In truth
In
is
truth
risen.
is risen.
Χριστός ανεβία.
Adevărat a înviat.
This Sunday, the sixth Sunday after the resurrection of the Lord, we already come to the last Sunday before the Ascension, which occurs this Thursday. The reading we just had about the blind man has some similarities to the one that we heard 2 weeks ago about the healing of the paralytic. It has the similarities in that the reaction of the people that saw this miracle occur. This man who was born blind had no eyes. That's spoken of quite clearly. And the Lord, out of spittle and clay, actually made eyes for him, being a creator, created the world, and gave it to this man, told him to go and wash, and he came back seeing. We sort of see here not one miracle, but actually about three. The first one is the creation of the eyes, right? Showing that Christ is actually the creator. And then the miracle that these eyes actually work. When the man put them on, he actually could see. The third one, which you may be a bit more difficult to comprehend, is a phenomenon that eye surgeons, eye doctors understand. On the rare occasions when a person who is being blind from birth somehow manages to have his eyes restored through surgery or some other ways, not through this, of course, which was a person with no eyes at all, there is a period where they have to readjust themselves, because you can think, they don't know distances, they don't know heights. They can walk off a high building or something and, destroy themselves or get killed by a car because they can't judge distances. But this third miracle allowed this man to act as if it was totally natural to receive sight like that and be immediately able to comprehend what the sight gives you. The reaction of the people was similar to the one we read with the paralytic. In particular, the Jewish leaders of the synagogue, the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the high priests, instead of glorifying Christ and honouring him for the great thing he did, they tried to put him down, tried to convince him of not keeping the Sabbath, tried to deride him in any way possible, and even wanted to inspire the people to do the same. That, however, is really just an excuse that they used. What's the real reason? The real reason is the secret reason of what they were trying to do. The concept here, I mentioned a few times, goes back all the way to about 600 BC, 600 years before Christ, when the Jews, the Hebrews, were captive by Babylon, Babylonian captivity it's called. The Jewish leaders at that time saw the process of the occult, magical things and whatever that the Babylonian mystics, magicians did. And they were very impressed because it worked. It actually worked. Whatever the Babylonians requested in their rituals, they got. And the reason they got that was because they were directly worshipping Lucifer, the fallen angel, 600 BC. And a group of these Jewish high priests, Pharisees, whatever, liked that particular cult and actually joined it and started to do the same thing. Why did it work? for the simple reason that Lucifer is able to grant people anything they want as long as they show loyalty to him. You don't have to change your life like you do for Christ. You don't have to repent. You don't have to live a life of virtue or anything like that. All you have to do is be loyal to Lucifer, bow down to him and worship him, and he'll grant you anything you like. And from that day onwards, this Jewish sect, which became known as the Kabbalah, started to make various edicts and pseudo-theology to eventually rule the whole world. And that, believe it or not, continues to this day and will continue until the second coming of Christ. On one hand, when the flock, the Jewish people would go to the synagogue, the sort of innocent Jewish people, they would see the regular services that were done there, the reading of the Psalms and all those sorts of things. After that, these Kabbalistic Jews would retire to secret places and do the rituals bound up with Lucifer. And the idea behind that was that there are two gods. There is Lucifer and there is the God that we know. In English we translate as I am, Yahweh in Hebrew, and that these two gods fight each other. But because Lucifer gives people whatever they want without having to change their life in any way, they favour that and they want that Luciferian ritual to overtake the real God. Of course, it never will, even though they might make a lot of progress. And indeed, the prophecies are that towards the end times, the Luciferians will actually bring forth their Antichrist, who will be the ultimate ruler of the world for temporary time until the second coming of Christ. The writings of this Kabbalah are now very readily available on social media and whatever, and in books. You know, there's books like this, but I don't suggest you buy them, and I don't suggest you read them unless you are quite well versed in spiritual life and a practicing spiritual life. In the West, the high priest of this Kabbalah movement is a man called Aleister Crowley. And there are others with him. There's the Madame Blavatsky, yeah, and a lot of others. But that Crowley is the one that stands out in the West, right? He's not Jewish, but he took up this Kabbalistic thing and summarized a lot of its teachings and helped to put it in practice and gained a lot of other followers in that respect. It's quite legitimate to say today that all the major world historical incidents, the wars and whatever, underneath it is working the Kabbalah system. It's not easy to spot because it comes through various layers. Even now, for example, if we look at the situation in the Ukraine, you know yourself the propaganda that flows from that. The easiest way, or one of the easiest ways to see what's working behind is to try and get onto the ones who manage the finances, the high finance of all these things. And you will see that both sides, whether you're on one side or the other, are still run by the same group. I mean, Hitler, for example, he went off killing a lot of Jews, yet Jews were financing him, you know? Same with what's happening in the Ukraine today. You have, Russia is supposedly winning, but at the same time, you go to Russia, he's still fine. The communism mark, there's still Lenins everywhere, there's Dzerzhinskys, and those mass murderers haven't been put away. So, there is something working behind the scenes that is not propagated through public or social media, through news or anything like that, but it's there if you search it out. And this is the real crux of what's happening in the world. This warfare between Lucifer, the fallen angel, and Christ, God, the God I am. As when Moses went up into the mountain to receive the commandments, and he saw the burning bush, and he asked, what is this? Who are you? And the Lord replied, I am that I am. And on many occasions, Christ also used that word. When he was asked, who are you? He said, I am. And there are translations of that in Greek and in Slavonic and in Hebrew. There are two very important quotes from the New Testament which also confirm what we as Christians have to know. When Christ was talking to some of these high priests and Pharisees, he said to them, ye are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you wish to do. That one was a manslayer from the beginning, and have not stood in truth, because there is no truth in him. Now, when you read that passage, it sort of comes across that Christ is criticizing them to try and wake them up, wake their conscience. Like, you're of a devil, But it's deeper than that. The fact of the matter is, Christ knows that these Kabbalists are actually the supporters of Lucifer. And that's why he says, ye are of your father. That's in John 8:44. You are of your father, the devil. It's not sort of like a naughty child or something like that. He's actually telling us who these people are and whom they worship and why they worship that. Then we read again how to start the warfare against this. And this particular passage, the Holy Fathers always say, is the quintessential one that tells us that we need to have this spiritual life, this spiritual warfare internally to try and overcome these influences from the demonic realm. You've heard this passage before. It's because for us, the wrestling is not against flesh and blood. It's not against material things that we see, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the cosmic rulers of darkness of this age, against the spiritual hosts of evil on account of the heavenly things. You see, that's the warfare that this Kabbalistic group through the demonic realm brings upon Christians. And wherever there is the true church, today we call it the Orthodox Church to separate it from Catholicism and Protestantism and whatever, the warfare is always there. That's why we have this thing in Ukraine. I think you all know about Manathos and the greatness of that place. Well, there in Kiev, in the Ukraine, is the sort of eastern side of that, a monastery called the Kiev Caves Monastery. Massive monastery with several caves that go underground. In those caves are kept hundreds of holy relics of the saints from that area. It was from there that actually the Slavic lands began. Russia began from there. The Ukraine has always been part of Russia. There's no argument about that at all. And a few months ago, Zheletsky closed that place, drove out the monks, torturing them, killing them, destroying genuine Orthodox parishes in that area, and allowing his neo-Nazi groups, the Azov and the Banderas, to go around and torture Orthodox Christians as much as they desire. All because of this Kabbalistic sect that is working and that has in its grasp the highest finances of the world. And it is rolling that out as each century goes by, the end result being to capture the whole world under themselves. Financially, they're already nearly there. Nearly there. It's only a matter of time that the life of people in the West or in those so-called free countries are destroyed from that freedom. And I think you all know, adult people, particularly those who have lived in Western countries a few decades ago, how things have quickly changed and how the freedoms that we once have, young people today can't even understand it. There's so many rules and regulations and horrible enslavements to various things that never existed before. And it's all done for safety reasons, for protection and whatever. No, it's not. It's done for control. And you'll see that that's going to come out more and more and more. Should I say anything about the other so-called Christians in the world? The Protestants, the Roman Catholics. I think you all know that the first Protestant was Rome. That was the first one that protested and left the other four jurisdictions of the original church. It left Constantinople, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexandria. Okay, so there were 5 jurisdictions. One of them left. The result of that was that a few decades or a few centuries after, we have the full Protestant movement going into high gear with Luther. But who was Luther's teacher? This is, they don't actually tell you. It was a Kabbalist, Philip Melanchthon. He was a Kabbalist, and he taught Luther. And Luther devised a plan which is very similar to what the Judaizers do. You know, the Bible only is the true thing. There is no body and blood in the so-called Eucharist. It's just a remembrance. No icons are allowed. Worldly logic takes place instead of spiritual understanding. And there is a return to Old Testament rituals. I don't know whether you've seen it, but Roman Catholics in particular, they trashed the Eucharist that Christ gave us with real bread, leavened bread and wine, and used crackers. I don't know where they got that from. You know, this one cracker or something. You know, you've got 200 people there, and somehow they managed to give cracker to 200 people. Christ used not crackers, he did not use unleavened bread. And that's clear from the original gospel in Greek, that he used real bread, leavened bread, and real wine. But this return to this Old Testament ritual instead of a sacrament is what those are all about. In any case, hopefully that fills you in a little bit about the situation that we face and are going to face more and more in our lives. And we have to know how to stand up to it. As we just read about the warfare that's interior, that's a non-negotiable concept. If you want to be a Christian, a true Christian, you have to have that interior warfare. In other words, not just your exterior disposition has to be in line with the commandments, but your interior thoughts, your feelings, all those secret things, the double thinking and the triple thinking that you have, is all contrary to God's way. Everything has to be put in order and has to be put in oneness. Otherwise, you're a divided person. You're doing one thing, you're thinking about something else. Now, even in church, you're standing here, crossing yourself, apparently listening to the prayers or whatever, and thinking about your holiday in the Gold Coast, for example. You know, that's the way it is. That's the division that occurs in the fallen nature of man, which Christ came and fixed. And we are to embrace that through spiritual life. And if you're not doing that spiritual life, just remember that at the great judgment, that's what you're judged upon. How close are you to Christ's likeness in your life? Which means that fullness of being, overcoming that fallen nature has to be grown within you whilst you're on earth. Nobody can completely shed it here except the Mother of God did on account of her special life. And that's why she's a great example to us on how to conduct it. But all the saints and whatever went close to shedding and getting on top of that. And that's what we have to do in our life. So this Thursday we have the Ascension of the Lord and the final days of Pascha, getting prepared in 10 days after that for the Pentecost, where everything that we have in the church was given to us, and Orthodox Christians have never added, nor subtracted, nor changed any of that. And that's the way that we analyze and decide, are you in the true church or not? Christ is risen.
Christ is risen.